The war between humans and the Valari Empire had finally ended. After years of destruction across many stars, peace was now possible. Leaders from both sides met on a planet called Firevale, a quiet world with red skies and silver grass. There, they signed a peace agreement. Baron Thalvek, one of the most powerful alien nobles of the Valari, came to the treaty with a strange request. He wanted to offer something to show good faith, something personal. "I will give my daughter to be raised by a human," he said in his deep voice. Gasps filled the room. His daughter, Lady Niril, was known across the Valari worlds. She had never spoken a single word since birth. The Valari said she was mute, but many believed her silence hid a secret. The human leaders were surprised. Why would the Baron give away his only daughter? Was it a trick? Was she dangerous? But Baron Thalvek only bowed his head and said, "If there is to be peace, there must be trust. My daughter will live among your people." After long talks, the humans agreed. The girl would not be given to a scientist or general, but to a quiet man named Daniel Reeve. Daniel was a retired human soldier who lived on a small farm on the edge of Earth's outer colony. He was known for being kind, patient, and wise. He had fought in the war, but never liked it. After the war ended, he chose to live alone, growing vegetables and reading old books. When the government told Daniel about the request, he didn't. "Understand, you want me to take care of an alien noble girl?" he asked. "Yes," the official said. "We need someone peaceful, someone who will treat her like family." Daniel thought about it for a while. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll do it." A week later, a smooth silver ship landed in the field outside Daniel's home. Baron Thalvek stepped out first. Behind him was a young alien woman, his daughter. She was tall and graceful, with long black hair and a rich teal-blue skin color. Her eyes were soft, almost glowing, and she looked around with calm curiosity. She did not speak, not even when her father introduced her. "This is my daughter, Niril," said the Baron. "She does not speak, but she understands. Treat her with respect, and she will learn your ways." Daniel walked forward and offered his hand. Niril looked at it, then gently touched it. That was the beginning. Without saying much more, the Baron returned to his ship. Before he left, he said one last thing to Daniel. "Be patient with her. Her silence is not simple." And then he flew away, leaving his only daughter behind. Daniel turned to Niril and smiled. "Come on, let's go inside." His home was small but cozy. There were shelves filled with books, a warm fireplace, and a window that looked out over a field of golden crops. Niril followed Daniel quietly. She touched the walls, looked at the pictures, and ran her fingers along the shelves. Daniel made her a cup of tea, unsure what Valari liked. She didn't drink it, but held the cup gently, warming her hands. When Daniel offered food, she tried a little, but ate very slowly. For the first few days, Niril said nothing, but she watched everything. She watched Daniel as he worked on the farm, fed the chickens, fixed broken machines, and read books at night. She followed him like a quiet shadow, always near but never speaking. Daniel didn't rush her. He spoke kindly, using simple words. "This is corn," he said one day in the field. "We plant it, we water it, and it grows." Niril knelt and touched the soft earth. She looked at the small green sprout in front of her and gave the faintest nod. Another day, Daniel pointed to the sky. "That's a hawk," he said. "It watches from above. Very smart." Niril tilted her head and followed the bird with her eyes. Each night, she sat by the window, drawing in a notebook. At first, Daniel couldn't see what she was sketching, but one night when she was asleep, he peeked inside the book. He was surprised to see perfect drawings of earth animals, plants, and even his face. Calm, smiling, tired. She was studying everything. One evening, a neighbor stopped by. An older woman named Mary who brought fresh bread. "Is that the Valari girl?" she asked, whispering. "Yes," Daniel said. "She's beautiful," Mary said. "But is she safe?" Daniel looked at Narelle, who was quietly placing small stones in a pattern on the ground. "She hasn't harmed anyone. She's just quiet." "Well, be careful," Mary said before leaving. Rumors spread. Some people said Narelle was a spy. Others said she had powers. But Daniel ignored them. He believed what he saw, a gentle, curious girl trying to learn a new world. One day, Daniel got hurt while fixing a fence. A metal rod fell and hit his leg. He cried out and collapsed. Narelle rushed to him, eyes wide with fear. She touched his arm, her hands shaking. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, Daniel saw panic in her calm face. She tried to lift him, but she was not strong enough. Still, she stayed by his side, eyes filled with something deep, maybe care, maybe more. Daniel smiled weakly. "It's okay, Narelle. I'll be fine." She held his hand tightly and nodded. That night, while he rested with his leg bandaged, Narelle brought him warm water and sat by his side. She didn't draw. She didn't explore. She just stayed close. And Daniel wondered, was there more behind her silence? Was this the beginning of something no one expected? Daniel's leg healed slowly. For several days, he stayed inside the house, resting in his chair by the window. He used a wooden stick to walk, but the pain still made him move carefully. During this time, Narelle became more active. She swept the floor, cleaned the dishes, and even helped feed the animals outside. She moved gracefully, like a dancer. Every step was quiet. She still didn't speak, but Daniel could feel her presence growing stronger. One morning, Daniel woke up to find breakfast ready. A bowl of warm oatmeal sat on the table. Next to it was a small flower in a glass cup. Narelle stood nearby, watching him. Daniel smiled. "Did you make this?" Narelle nodded once. "You're full of surprises," he said kindly. She tilted her head and gave the faintest smile. It was small but real. Every day they found new ways to understand each other. Daniel would point at things and say the name slowly. Table, book, sun. Narelle would repeat the words, not with her voice, but by writing them in the air with her finger. Sometimes she drew the shapes on her arm with her nail. It was clear she understood. She just chose not to speak. Daniel began to leave simple notes around the house with earth words and pictures. Narelle collected them all and placed them in a small wooden box. Then she started writing back using paper and pencil. One note said, "Tree, tall, green, beautiful." Another said, "Daniel, good, kind, quiet." Daniel read her notes with wonder. Her thoughts were clear, soft, and full of feeling. She wasn't just learning. She was noticing everything. One evening, a sudden rainstorm rolled over the farm. Thunder echoed and lightning flashed in the sky. Daniel stepped outside to cover the chickens. When he came back, Narelle was standing in the middle of the room, frozen. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking. She wasn't just scared. She looked afraid of something deeper. "Narelle," Daniel said softly, "it's just a storm. It'll pass." But she didn't move. Then a loud crack of thunder shook the house. Narelle dropped to the floor, covering her ears. Daniel rushed to her side. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe." She looked up at him with frightened eyes. And then something strange happened. Daniel felt a light pressure in his mind, a soft whisper, not with sound, but something else. It wasn't clear, but it felt like her thoughts were reaching him. A single word formed in his head. Home. Daniel pulled back, confused. Had he imagined it? Or did Narelle just speak to him, without using her voice? He looked at her again. She stared at him, her hands still trembling. The whisper was gone. Everything was quiet again, except for the rain. The next day, Daniel didn't mention the whisper. He didn't want to scare her, but he started to wonder, was Narelle really mute? Or was she hiding something? Later that week, a group of scientists arrived from the capital. They wore clean white coats and carried small machines. They said they wanted to check on Narelle. "She is special," said one of them. "We need to study her mind." Quietly, of course. Daniel didn't like the idea, but he couldn't stop them. Narelle sat calmly while they placed sensors near her head and asked her to look at shapes on a screen. After 2 hours, the scientists left, whispering among themselves. One of them turned to Daniel and said, "Her brain activity is unusual, very active, too advanced for someone her age." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. The scientist shrugged. "We don't know. She may be more than mute. She may be unique." After they left, Narelle sat outside under the stars. Daniel joined her, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. He offered her one, and she took it. They sat in silence, looking at the sky. Daniel finally spoke. "They think you're special, but I already knew that." Narelle didn't react, but her eyes softened. Then Daniel said, "I think you can speak, not with your mouth, but with your mind." Narelle turned her head slowly toward him. He continued, "During the storm, I felt something. Word. Home. Was that you?" Narelle looked down. Then she reached for her notebook. She wrote a short sentence and handed it to him. "You are my home." Daniel read the words and felt his heart grow heavy in a good way. This girl, sent away by her father living in silence, had found comfort in him. "I'm glad," he whispered. From that day, Narelle became even closer to Daniel. She helped in the fields, learned to cook Earth meals, and watched old movies with him in the evenings. She laughed without sound, using her shoulders and eyes. And sometimes, when Daniel was thinking, deeply he felt small whispers in his mind. Not full sentences, but tiny pieces of emotion, like joy, sadness, or peace. She was speaking without words. One afternoon, Daniel found a new drawing in her notebook. It was a picture of her standing beside him, both smiling with stars above. Them. Below the drawing, she had written, "Not alien, not human, just us." Daniel smiled, but far away, on the Valari homeworld, someone else had noticed the change. Baron Thalvek sat in his cold throne room, looking at a report sent from Earth. His daughter had begun to respond. She was connecting with a human. The Baron's face grew tight. "So," he whispered, "her silence is ending." He closed the file and stood up. "Prepare my ship. I'm going to Earth." Daniel had never seen someone learn so quickly. Narelle moved like a quiet wind through the house, always helping, always watching, always thinking. She still didn't speak with her mouth, but something had changed. Her emotions were clearer, now. Sometimes she even smiled. Every evening, Daniel would sit by the fire, and Narelle would bring her notebook. She would draw pictures or write short messages. One night she wrote, "Do all humans fear silence?" Daniel thought for a moment, then answered, "Some do. Silence makes people feel alone." She nodded and wrote back, "I was born in silence, but here, silence feels full." Daniel smiled. "That's because you're not alone anymore." Her eyes glowed gently in the firelight. Over the next few days, something strange began to happen. Daniel started having dreams. In these dreams, he was walking through cities that didn't belong to Earth, tall towers of glass and light, creatures with glowing skin, voices that didn't speak with sound, but filled his mind. And always, Nirel was there. In the dreams, she would look at him and speak, not out loud, but directly into his thoughts. Her voice was clear and warm. "Daniel," she said in one dream, "I am not broken. I was made this way." When Daniel woke up, he sat in silence, wondering if the dream was just a dream, or something more. Later that morning, as they sat on the porch, Daniel looked at Nirel. "I had a dream," he said. "You were speaking, not with words, but with your mind." Nirel paused, then opened her notebook. She wrote slowly, "Maybe it was not a dream." Daniel stared at the page. "Are you doing this? Are you sending thoughts?" She nodded gently. "Why me?" he asked. She wrote again, "Because you listened when no one else did." That simple sentence said everything. Daniel now understood. Nirel had never been truly mute. She had simply lived in a world where no one could hear her. But here, on Earth with him, she had found someone who could feel her thoughts, even if just a little. Later that day, Nirel started drawing symbols Daniel had never seen before. Beautiful, flowing shapes like waves and stars. She drew them on paper. On the wall near the fireplace and even in the dirt outside, Daniel asked, "What are these?" She replied with a note. "They are part of my language, not Velari speech, but something older, something secret." Daniel watched her work for hours. She seemed focused, like something inside her was trying to come out. At night, Daniel called a friend who worked at the science center in the capital. His name was Tom, and he had studied many alien cultures. "I think Nirel is using symbols," Daniel told him. "Not regular Velari writing, something else." Tom replied, "Take pictures. I'll send a team." 2 days later, a group of experts arrived. They didn't bring loud machines or strange tools. They came quietly and respectfully. They took photos of Nirel's symbols and spoke gently with Daniel. One of them, a woman named Dr. Lena, said, "These are not just drawings. These are mental language patterns. We've only seen a few of them, on ancient Velari walls. We believe they are tied to telepathic energy." "Telepathic?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she said. "Thought communication. Very rare. If she's using these, she may not be mute. She may be gifted." That night, Daniel told Nirel what the scientists said. She didn't smile, but her eyes showed a calm joy. She wrote, "It is not a gift. It is a weight. That is why my voice was taken." Daniel frowned. "Taken? You mean someone stopped you from speaking?" She nodded slowly. Suddenly, everything made sense. She had not been silent by choice. Someone, maybe her own people, had blocked her voice. Maybe they were afraid of what she could say or do. Maybe she was different from the others in a way they couldn't understand. Daniel looked at her with kindness. "You don't have to be silent here." That same night, Nirel sat by the fireplace and closed her eyes. Daniel sat across from her, quietly watching. The room was peaceful. Then, like a wave of warm air, a soft whisper brushed Daniel's mind. It was not strong, but it was real. "Daniel, thank you." He sat up, eyes wide. "You spoke." Nirel opened her eyes and gave the faintest smile. The next morning, everything changed. A dark ship landed just beyond the farm, sleek, black, and silent. Its long legs touched the earth gently. Villagers gathered nearby, watching from a distance. The ship looked powerful and out of place among the quiet fields. Daniel stood at the gate as the ship's door opened. Baron Thalvek stepped out, tall and cold as ever. His golden robes shimmered in the sun. Behind him stood two Velari guards, their faces covered with silver masks. "Where is my daughter?" the Baron asked. Daniel stayed calm. "She's safe. She's inside." The Baron looked around the farm with disapproval. "You've taught her too much," he said. "She was not sent here to grow stronger. She was sent here to live," Daniel replied. "And now she's becoming who she really is." The Baron's voice became sharper. "You do not understand what she is. Her voice is not a gift. It is dangerous." "She is not dangerous," Daniel said firmly. "She is just awakening." Thalvik looked toward the house. "I want to see her." Daniel stepped aside. "Then speak to her with respect." The Baron walked to the house slowly. Nirel was already standing at the door, her hands by her side. She looked at her father with calm eyes. Thalvik stopped a few feet away. "Daughter," he said, "you must return with me. You are not safe here." She didn't move. She didn't write anything. Then something strange happened. Everyone around her felt a shift in the air, a gentle pressure, like soft waves in the mind. Then they heard a quiet, calm voice, not with ears, but inside their thoughts. "I will not return. I have found my own path." The Baron froze. His eyes narrowed. "You spoke," he said. Nirel stood tall, her teal-blue skin glowing gently in the sun. She had finally spoken. Not with fear, not with anger, but with truth. Baron Thalvik stood in silence. His daughter, Lady Nirel, had just spoken to him, not with her mouth, but through the mind. Her voice, soft and clear, had entered his thoughts like a breeze. It was the first time he had heard her speak in any way. The two Velari guards beside him looked at each other, unsure of what to do. No one had expected this. "You were not supposed to use the voice," the Baron said, his tone cold. Nirel stood still, calm but strong. The sun shone on her rich teal-blue skin. She didn't look afraid. Her eyes stayed locked on her father's. Daniel watched from a distance, his heart beating fast. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew it was important. Nirel had just shown her true ability, and now her father wanted to stop it. The Baron took a step forward. "You do not know what danger your voice brings. The Velari people fear it." Again, Nirel spoke through the mind, not just to her. "Father, but to everyone around, including Daniel and the two guards. They fear truth, not power." Her words were calm but firm. The Baron's face darkened. "I silenced you to protect the Empire." Daniel stepped in then. "She doesn't need protection. She needs freedom." The Baron turned sharply toward him. "You are a human farmer. You do not understand the Velari mind. Her voice is not just words, it can change thoughts, reveal lies, even break control. That is why it was sealed at birth." Daniel kept his voice steady. "And what has she done with it here? She helped. She learned. She cared. She didn't harm anyone. Maybe the problem is not her power. It's how your people see it." There was a long silence. Then the Baron said, "She will return with me." Nirel replied through her mind again. "No." The word was strong and clear. The guard stepped forward, but Nirel raised her hand gently. A quiet wave of energy pulsed through the air. It wasn't violent, it was peaceful, like a soft light, but it made everyone pause. Daniel felt it too, not fear, but calm. A feeling of balance. One of the guards suddenly removed his mask and looked at Nirel with wide eyes. "She speaks like the old ones?" he said softly. "I felt her voice in my heart." The Baron was shocked. "You will not disobey me." The guard bowed slightly to Nirel. "She is not a threat. She is a guide." For a moment, everything stood still. The wind blew gently. the golden fields. Around the farmhouse swayed like waves. Then Baron Thalvek turned and walked a few steps away. His face showed conflict. For years, he had believed that sealing his daughter's voice was the right thing to do. The Empire feared the power of the mind. The voice had once caused rebellion and unrest. It was locked away in the bloodline, but it had returned in her. He looked back at Narelle. "Do you hate me for what I did?" Narelle did not answer right away. Then, in her quiet mental voice, she said, "I do not hate. I feel sorrow. You took my voice to protect others, but in doing so, you took me away from myself." The Baron's shoulders dropped slightly. He was a strong man, a leader. But in this moment, he looked tired. "I thought you would be safer in silence." Daniel stepped closer. But she wasn't living, just surviving. Here she found peace. She found her own voice. The Baron looked at Daniel. "Why you? Why did her voice come to you?" Daniel shook his head. "I didn't ask for it. I just treated her like a person. That's all she needed." The Baron was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to his daughter. "I still fear what your power may bring. The Council will not accept this easily." Narelle replied, "Let them see me. Let them hear me. Let them decide with open minds." The Baron stared at her, then finally nodded. "You will stay, for now. But the Empire must be told." He turned to leave. The guards followed. But the one who had removed his mask paused and bowed again to Narelle before stepping back into the ship. As the ship lifted into the sky, Daniel and Narelle stood side by side, watching it disappear into the clouds. "You were brave," Daniel said. Narelle looked at him and smiled softly. She picked up her notebook and wrote, "I was not alone. That made me strong." That evening, as the sun set, they sat together on the porch. Daniel held a warm drink in his hand, and Narelle sketched the sunset in her notebook. The colors of the sky reflected in her eyes. "Do you think your people will come again?" Daniel asked. She wrote, "Yes, but next time, I will speak first." Daniel nodded. "Then they better be ready." Narelle smiled again, this time wider. It was the smile of someone who had finally stepped out of the shadow and into the light. From silence, she had found strength. And in a quiet human home, far from her empire, a new chapter of peace had begun. Not just between two people, but between two worlds. Life on the farm slowly returned to normal. Daniel went back to tending the crops, and Narelle helped with every task. But something had changed. Not just in her, but in the air around them. Narelle was no longer the silent guest. She still didn't speak with her mouth, but her mind now carried gentle whispers. Only Daniel could feel them clearly, but even the animals on the farm seemed to notice. The birds landed closer. The cows stayed calmer. The wind seemed softer when she was near. One morning, as Daniel fixed a broken fence, Narelle came over holding her notebook. She handed it to him with a shy look. On the page, she had written something surprising. "I want to go to the village." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure?" Narelle nodded. It was the first time she had asked to leave the farm. Until now, she had always stayed away from crowds. Maybe it was time. So Daniel packed a bag and took Narelle into the nearby village. The village was simple. Rows of small shops, children playing in the streets, and neighbors chatting near bakeries. When people saw Nyril, many stared. Some whispered. A few smiled. Daniel held her hand gently and whispered, "Ignore the stares. Just walk with me." They visited a market where Narelle looked at colorful fruits and glowing stones from other planets. She didn't speak, but her eyes showed wonder. She pointed to a small wooden flute. Daniel asked the shopkeeper, "How much?" The man replied, "That's from the moon colony. Simple, but beautiful." Daniel paid and gave the flute to Narelle. She held it carefully, then placed it near her lips, but didn't blow. She was remembering. A small child walked up to her, curious. "Are you really an alien?" the boy asked. Narelle looked down at him and nodded gently. "Do you eat people?" he asked. Daniel almost spoke up, but Narelle bent down and shook her head with a smile. "Can you fly?" She looked up at the sky, then shook her head again. The boy laughed. "You're not scary at all." He ran off, and Narelle stood up slowly. Daniel smiled. "You made a friend." They returned home just before sunset. That night, Narelle sat by the window with the flute. She still hadn't played it. Instead, she stared at it, lost in thought. Daniel asked, "Did the village make you feel nervous?" She didn't answer, with her mind. Instead, she wrote something in her notebook. "I liked it, but I felt watched, like someone was waiting." Daniel grew quiet. He had also noticed a few strange people in the village, humans who didn't speak, didn't smile, and wore small devices in their ears. He had a feeling they weren't just regular visitors. The next day, his feeling turned out to be true. Message arrived on a sleek silver drone. It floated above the farm, blinking red. Daniel grabbed the note attached to it. It read, "We request the girl's presence at the United Earth Council. A hearing has been called regarding her voice." Daniel sighed. "They want to meet you," he told Narelle. She simply nodded. He wasn't sure if this was good or bad. The council was made of leaders from Earth, Mars, and several nearby planets. They didn't always agree. Some believed in peace. Others feared anything they couldn't control. And Narelle was something they didn't understand. The journey to the council took one day by ship. Daniel and Narelle sat in silence most of the way. When they arrived, they were taken to a large round chamber with tall windows and smooth gray walls. Council members sat in high chairs looking down. One of them, a woman with silver hair, spoke first. "Lady Narelle, daughter of Baron Thalvek, we welcome you." Narelle bowed respectfully. Another man said, "It has been reported that you have used a mental voice. Is this true?" Narelle closed her eyes and answered not with her mouth, but with her mind. The message was felt by all. Yes. The room was silent. Some members looked surprised. Others whispered. The silver-haired woman asked, "Can you control it?" Narelle answered, "Yes. I use it only with permission." Daniel was proud. Her answers were calm, clear, and full of respect, but not everyone was pleased. A tall man with a sharp voice stood. "This kind of power is dangerous," he said. "What if others like her appear? What if this voice spreads? Could it control minds, start wars?" Narelle looked at him and sent a soft message. "My voice cannot force truth. It only reveals it. If a lie breaks, that is not my doing. It is the truth rising." The man frowned, but said nothing more. Then the silver-haired woman asked, "Why did your father silence you?" Narelle paused, then spoke gently. "Because the Empire fears what it does not control. But truth cannot stay silent forever." The room grew quiet. Finally, the woman said, "And now that your voice has returned, what will you do?" Narelle looked around the room. She raised her hand and spoke one final message. "I will teach. I will share. I will use my voice to bring peace, not fear." After a long silence, the council voted. The result: Narelle would be allowed to live freely on Earth, but under peaceful observation. No harm would come to her, and she would not be forced to leave. As they left the chamber, Daniel looked at her and smiled. "You handled that better than I could have," Narelle replied, not through her mind, but softly, for the first time in days with her real voice. "Thank you." Daniel stopped walking and turned to her. "You spoke," he said. Nero nodded. "With you, I am safe." He had waited so long, never expecting to hear her speak aloud. Even though her mind was powerful, that single word from her lips, "Thank you," felt warmer than all the messages she had sent before. She didn't speak much after that, but when she did, her voice was gentle, smooth, and filled with calm energy. She only used it when it mattered. Mostly, she still shared her thoughts through her mind. But now the world knew she could do both. When they returned to the farm, the fields felt even more peaceful than before. The birds sang more often. The sky seemed brighter. But Daniel also felt something else. Change was coming. News of Nerel's voice had spread. On every planet connected to the United Earth Council, people were talking. Some saw her as a gift, others as a risk. But one thing was clear. No one could ignore her anymore. One afternoon, a message arrived on a new drone. This time, it was from the Valari Empire. Daniel read the message aloud. Baron Thalvek invites Daniel Reeve and Lady Nerel to the Valari capital. The Council of Elders wishes to meet them both. Daniel looked at Nerel. "What do you think?" She looked into his eyes and simply nodded. That evening, they packed their bags. The journey would be long and the place unfamiliar. But Nerel didn't seem afraid. The Valari ship that came for them was silent, smooth, and shaped like a silver leaf. Inside, the walls glowed softly, and the air felt cool and clean. Daniel had never seen anything like it. Nerel sat quietly. During the trip, her hands resting in her lap. She was calm, but Daniel could feel her thoughts moving like ripples in water. She was preparing herself. They arrived on Valar Prime, the home planet of the Valari. It was unlike Earth. The sky was a deep purple. The trees were tall and silver. The buildings looked like glass towers shaped by the wind. Everything moved gently, as if nature and technology lived together in peace. The capital was quiet, but people stared as Nerel passed. Many bowed. Some touched their foreheads in a sign of respect. Others whispered her name. At the gates of the council hall, Baron Thalvek stood waiting. He looked older than before. His golden robe shone, but his face looked thoughtful. "Nerel," he said. She bowed her head slightly. "Father," she replied, not through the mind, but with her voice. Daniel noticed the Baron's hands tighten, just for a second, but he nodded. "You are stronger now," he said. "I am myself now," she answered. They walked into the hall. Inside, 12 elders sat in a circle. Their robes were dark, their faces calm. In the center was a clear platform of light. One of the elders spoke. "Lady Nerel, daughter of Thalvek, do you know why we called you here?" Nerel stepped forward and nodded. "Yes, because I spoke," the elder continued. "The voice has not been heard in generations. It is feared, not because it is evil, but because it cannot be hidden. The voice shows truth." Another elder added, "When your voice returned, did you feel control, or did you feel pain?" "I felt freedom," she replied. "Have you used it to harm?" they asked. "No," she said softly. The elders looked at each other. Daniel watched closely. He didn't speak. This was Nerel's moment. Finally, one elder stood. "We watched your time on Earth. You used your voice with care. You shared peace. You brought no fear. This is not the way of a threat. This is the way of a teacher." He stepped down from his seat and walked to her. "Will you return to Valar and guide your people?" Nerel looked toward Daniel. Then she turned back and said, "I will visit. I will teach. But Earth is also my home. I will walk between both worlds." The elder nodded. "That is wise." Baron Thalvek spoke now. I feared your voice. I tried to hide it. But I see now. It was not meant to be hidden. It was meant to shine. He turned to Daniel. You showed her kindness. You gave her peace. For that I thank you. Daniel nodded. She gave that peace back to me. Later that night, in a quiet garden behind the hall, Narelle sat under a glowing tree. Daniel sat beside her. Do you want to stay here? He asked. Narelle shook her head. I want to return, but I want to come back here often. Daniel smiled. Then we'll make this garden our second home. Narelle looked at him and said something that made his heart pause. Daniel, I am no longer afraid of myself. He looked into her eyes. I never thought you should be. She smiled, a soft, happy smile. As stars began to fill the purple sky, Narelle placed the flute, still unplayed, in her lap. Daniel asked, Will you ever play it? She looked at the stars, then at the flute. Yes, but not alone. She raised it to her lips and blew gently. A soft sound filled the garden, sweet and clear. Daniel took out a small harmonica he had brought from Earth. Slowly, he joined her melody. 2 different sounds. 2 different people. 1 shared song. That night, in a quiet alien garden, a girl who was once silent and a man who once felt alone made music together, not just with notes, but with understanding. A soft wind blew across the golden fields of Earth. The sky above was clear, and birds flew slowly over Daniel's farm. The sound of leaves rustling in the trees was peaceful. It had been 1 full month since Narelle returned from the Valari, homeworld. Life had become different, but in a good way. Narelle now spent her time between 2 places. She lived with Daniel on Earth, where she helped in the fields, cared for animals, and continued learning human language. But she also visited Velar Prime, where she was invited to speak to small groups of Velari scholars and students. She never spoke loudly. She always used her calm voice, sometimes her real voice, sometimes her mind. But no matter which voice she used, people listened. Her message was always the same. Truth does not hurt. Hiding truth does. Because of her, some Velari leaders began to change. A few even removed the old rules that punished children born with mental abilities. For the first time in generations, truth was not feared. It was welcomed. On Earth, people also changed. Some who had feared her now waved when they saw her in the village. Children who once stared at her now smiled and played near her. She taught a small group of them how to sit quietly and listen, not with their ears, but with their hearts. Daniel built a small wooden platform near the farm where she could sit and speak when visitors came. Sometimes humans, sometimes Velari, sometimes both. One evening, Narelle and Daniel were sitting on the porch. The sky was orange from the setting sun. Daniel looked at her and asked, Do you ever feel tired? Narelle looked up. Sometimes. Not from speaking, but from being watched. Daniel nodded. People expect a lot from you now. She smiled softly. I don't mind, as long as I stay true to who I am. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You've taught me something important. What is that? She asked. That quiet people often carry the deepest voices. Narelle smiled again. Just then, a small ship landed near the edge of the field. From it stepped the same silver-haired woman from the United Earth Council. She came with a message. We would like Narelle to speak at the Unity Assembly, she said. Leaders from many worlds will be there. We want her to tell her story. Daniel looked at Narelle. She gave a small nod. I will speak, she said. The Unity Assembly was held on a peaceful moon called Solina. It was known as a place of peace, where no weapons were allowed and no armies ever gathered. On the day of the event, The great hall was filled with thousands of people, leaders, students, farmers, doctors, and travelers from many worlds. They had all heard stories of the girl who once had no voice, and they had come to see her with their own eyes. When Narelle stepped onto the round stage, silence filled the room. She stood tall, wearing a simple white robe, and looked around slowly. Daniel sat in the front row, quietly supporting her. Narelle took a deep breath, then stepped forward. She did not use her mind voice this time. She spoke with her mouth, clear, calm, and slow. When I was born, I was silent. Not because I chose to be, but because others feared what I might say. They feared my voice would change things. She looked at the crowd. They were right. It did. She paused. But change does not mean harm. Change can bring peace. Change can heal. And sometimes, when we listen to silence, we hear the most honest truths. Everyone listened closely. No one even blinked. I learned these lessons not from my own people, but from a human farmer. A man with no special powers. A man who didn't try to fix me, but just stayed beside me. He gave me something rare. Space to grow. Narelle pointed gently to Daniel. People turned to look at him. He smiled, but said nothing. Now, Narelle said, I walk between two worlds. I am not only Valari. I am not only someone with a voice. I am simply Narelle. The crowd rose in a quiet, respectful, standing gesture, one hand on heart, one hand to the sky. It was a symbol of honor across many planets. Later that night, back on the ship, Narelle sat with Daniel. You were amazing, Daniel said. She looked at him. It felt right. He nodded. You've changed more than just laws or rules. You've changed hearts. She looked out the window at the stars. Do you think others like me will come forward now? She asked. I think they already are, Daniel said. And he was right. Over the next few months, messages came from many planets. Young people, Valari and human, wrote letters to Narelle. Some said they too had silent gifts. Others said they had been afraid to speak. But after hearing her story, they wanted to try. Narelle answered every letter. She told each person the same truth. You don't have to speak loudly, just speak honestly. Daniel built a small learning center near the farm. Narelle called it the Circle of Listening. Anyone could come, no matter their age, planet, or past. They sat in a circle, spoke softly, and listened deeply. Sometimes Narelle spoke. Sometimes she simply sat and listened. But in every session, people left with peace in their hearts. One night, as the stars shone brightly above the field, Daniel and Narelle sat side by side. She held the wooden flute in her hands. Play something, Daniel said. Narelle raised the flute and began to play. The music was gentle, like wind through leaves. It danced in the air, light and full of feeling. Daniel took out his harmonica and joined in. Together, they filled the night with sound, not loud, not grand, but true. And across the stars, in places near and far, people remembered the story of the girl who had no voice, and how a quiet farmer helped her find it, not with power, not with force, but with kindness. And from that kindness, peace grew.